Hey guys, Will here. So we're back again today with yet another entry-level direct drive bundle from MOZA Racing. Now this one is particularly special because the wheel that comes with this bundle unlocks official Xbox compatibility for a variety of MOZA Racing products. So today we're going to be doing a couple of things. We'll of course be checking out this new R3 bundle, as well as exploring Xbox compatibility with the MOZA ecosystem. So by the end of today's video, you should have a good understanding of whether the R3 bundle is going to be the right product for you and what the experience is like using Xbox licensed products with MOZA Racing's ecosystem on an Xbox. So let's get started. Okay, so quite a bit to get through today, but firstly, a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Micro Center. Now, if you're in the US, you're probably already familiar with Micro Center as an absolute mecca when it comes to all kinds of electronic gadgets, PC hardware, and the like. What you might not be aware of though, is that they also carry an increasing range of sim racing products. And the really cool thing about that is that you can actually get eyes on, and in some cases, even hands on with a lot of sim racing products before you choose to purchase them. So you can visit your local Micro Center to check out everything that they range, or there's some links down below to a couple of promotions that are running at the moment as well. So they're offering new customers $25 off their purchase of $100 or more. They've also got a cool thing where you can submit pictures of your PC or sim racing rig and get a $25 off coupon too. And they've just added a new racing sim builder that allows you to configure your own racing sim online too. So links down in the description, check them out or visit your local Micro Center today. Now, we should also say a quick thank you to MOZA Racing for sending across the R3 bundle for us to check out today. Now, we will be cross-comparing this against a variety of different competitor products today to give you an understanding of what might suit your particular needs best. So it's important that you guys know that all of the gear that we're going to be talking about today was sent to us for review purposes under exactly the same conditions. Now, if you do decide you want to pick up any of the gear that you see in today's video, there will be some links down in the description below. Those are an awesome way of helping support our work here at Boosted Media at no additional cost to you. And that's just a way that you guys can help support us here at Boosted Media if you find what we do beneficial. So really do appreciate your support there. But let's kick off today's video by talking about pricing. Now, we're going to tackle today's video a little bit differently from how we might normally look at a bundle review like this, simply because the overall experience of using the R3 is very similar to what we've seen in a bunch of different bundles that we've seen from MOZA Racing recently. And I don't want to get bogged down in just covering the same details over and over and over again for you guys. So there will be a little bit of assumed knowledge in today's video. I'll drop some links down in the description below for the relevant videos if you do want to dig any deeper. We will be having a look over software, of course, the driving experience, all those important things, what the hardware is like and everything. But we're also going to be focusing quite heavily today on compatibility with Xbox, because there are a few really important intricacies that you guys need to understand. So that's what we're going to be covering today, but let's start off with the pricing. So the R3 bundle, well, let's first let you know what it comes with. So it comes with this tiny little 3.9 peak Newton meter direct drive wheelbase, as well as their 280 millimeter ES Xbox compatible steering wheel. Now, the fact that it's the wheel that is Xbox compatible is going to become very important, so keep that in the back of your mind. It also comes bundled with MOZA's SRP Lite Pedals. Now, remembering, of course, that if you're gaming on PC, you can pretty much run any pedals that you want to. You just plug whatever you have in via USB. If you're racing on console, then you will have to use pedals that are compatible with the base directly. You're going to be connecting them directly to the base and then connecting the base through to your Xbox. So the pedals that are going to be available for you guys to use in each console compatible ecosystem are going to be a very, very important consideration, not one to be taken lightly. So we'll dive into that a little bit later on too. Now, the other thing that is bundled with this as well is MOZA's table clamp, which I actually think they've done a really good job of. We've covered this in the past on the channel. I actually think this is a much better table clamp than what you get with the CSL-DD, but we'll unpack that a little bit later on as well. Let's get into this pricing before we get sidetracked. So you're looking at $399 US for the R3 bundle, including all the bits and pieces that we've looked at. So these are the prices that have been supplied to us directly by MOZA. MOZA operate a little bit differently from Fanatec, for example. Fanatec only sell direct to customer from their own website. They don't have resellers around the world. MOZA have a huge range of resellers depending on where you are in the world, and who you buy it from can actually have a really big impact on the price. And we do have some affiliate partners which we've linked down in the description below, which are good options to use, but it does pay to just shop around, make sure you're getting the best possible price, and just make sure that you are factoring any additional taxes, shipping costs, duties, things like that into your purchasing decision. But the pricing that we've received from MOZA is US dollars 399. If you're in Europe, you're looking at 439 euro, 399 pounds if you're in Britain, or 689 Australian dollars. Now, if you quickly compare that across to a couple of the other bundles which you guys might be looking at from Fanatec and Logitech, for example. The Fanatec WRC bundle, which comes with the CSL DD, the WRC wheel, as well as their CSL pedals, comes in at $480. The table clamp doesn't come included in that particular bundle. So you're looking at an extra $29.95 if you're looking for that table clamp as well. If you're looking at something like the Logitech G923, the pricing that we found on Logitech's website is $329. Now, when I went through the checkout process to test this yesterday, it did include taxes and shipping. Just make sure that you double check that because it may vary again depending on where you are in the world. Also keep in mind that we do have a 5% discount code available for Logitech G products linked down in the description below for you guys. If you're looking at the G920, that is $299. And if you're looking at stepping up a few notches to something like the Logitech G Pro, you're going to be looking at $1,000 for that. And then that doesn't include the pedal. So you're looking at an extra $349 for those pedals. Now that does of course step up the user experience quite significantly, but it's a lot more expensive. It's not really in the same category as what we're looking at in today's video. Now, while not officially Xbox compatible like what we're looking at in today's video, it is also worth quickly mentioning the Camus C5 bundle, which we looked at recently here on the channel too. That is a 5 Nm direct drive wheelbase, which has a wheel integrated with it. So you can't just easily change the wheel over if you want to swap out like what we have with all these other ecosystems. But that guy comes in at $249, not including taxes and shipping. We also have a 5% discount code available down in the description for that as well. So if you're racing on PC exclusively, that is another one that is worth considering. Now, while we're on the subject of PC only compatible devices, there's also the MOZA R3 Bundle, which is worth checking out. Full review linked down in the description below for you guys. That comes with basically the same accessories as what we have here, a 5 Nm version rather than 3.9, so the R5 rather than the R3, same SRP Lite pedals, and a non-Xbox compatible version of the same ES wheel. The main difference here being that this has got the faux leather wrapping rather than the harder plastic wrapping that we have on the Xbox version, but otherwise very similar, and again, linked down in the description if you want to check it out in more detail. So I think that gives you the full context for what we're looking at here in terms of price point. A 3.9 Nm direct drive wheelbase that comes bundled with pedals and a steering wheel, Xbox compatible. And again, of course, depending on your local taxes, shipping and import costs, you may find that this is quite significantly cheaper than Fanatec's closest bundle as well. What I want to do now is spend a bit of time talking about compatibility specifically. So the first and probably most important thing that I want you guys to understand here is that when it comes to Xbox compatibility or officially licensed Xbox compatibility, that compatibility actually comes from a security chip inside the steering wheel. So if you've got a removable steering wheel on your device, that is where the compatibility is actually coming from. Now that becomes really important because what it essentially means is that any wheelbase that you then connect that wheel to also becomes Xbox compatible. But there are a couple of catches to that. Remember we said earlier that you can't connect your pedals directly to the Xbox. The reason for that is that the Xbox only supports one input device in addition to a controller. So you have to actually have the pedals connected to the wheelbase. So what that means within the MOZA ecosystem is that any V2 wheelbase, which is compatible with the ES wheel and also has a pedal connection port on the back, like this little guy just here, will also be Xbox compatible. So we actually tested this with the R5 and the R12, and the experience was actually really good. Now, another catch here is that at this point in time, they are only selling the one Xbox compatible wheel, and it is only available in this bundle. So you're kind of trapped into having to buy the bundle at the moment if you do want that Xbox compatibility. Now, we did reach out and ask them specifically whether they plan to A, sell this wheel on its own, or B, sell additional Xbox compatible wheels in the future on their own so that you can get that compatibility without having to buy into a bundle that you might not potentially need or want. And their response was, and I read this verbatim directly from their email, you might be able to buy the Xbox compatible wheel on its own. So they're not committing to anything there. And we are planning to release more Xbox compatible wheels in the future. So a little bit of a non-answer there. And that wording certainly doesn't commit them to selling this wheel on its own either. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But as it stands at the time of recording this video, at least, that was their response. So Xbox compatibility comes from the steering wheel. Now, what we haven't talked about here is PS4 and PS5. Now, PS4, PS5 are a little bit different. The compatibility in those cases, if it's officially licensed at least, comes from a security chip similar to what we have here, but actually inside the wheelbase. Now, at this point in time, at least, MOZA haven't released any information at all pertaining to PlayStation compatibility. But the important thing that I want you guys to understand is that if they were to release PlayStation compatible products into the future, it's not going to be as simple as it is with Xbox. That means that, you know, if you already have a MOZA wheelbase and they then release products which are PlayStation compatible, you would have to buy a new wheelbase to get that compatibility. It would never be as simple as just plugging in a PlayStation compatible wheel and having that work on any wheelbase, because again, the compatibility for PlayStation comes from a security chip inside the base, not inside the wheel, whereas Xbox, it comes from the wheel, which makes things simple and cost effective when it comes to the Xbox ecosystem. So that's everything you need to be aware of in terms of compatibility from a purely hardware perspective. One other thing that I do just want to quickly note, and this is something that you'll need to check whenever you happen to be watching this video, but at the time that we recorded this, unfortunately, this bundle is not working with the Assetto Corsa Competizione on Xbox, which was really disappointing. It does detect the wheel. You can see the inputs, the analog inputs working, but then when you actually go onto track, what happens is it defaults back to the controller profile. And if you go back in and try to change it back to wheel, it just keeps on going back to controller again. So we were never actually able to get that working. Now I did do a bunch of troubleshooting online. There's been quite a few people that have had issues with other wheels over the years with this title as well. Tried all the various different fixes that people suggest online. None of them worked. Then I got in touch with MOZA and they told me that their technical department are aware of the issue and they are working on it. So at this point in time, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to play Assetto Corsa Competizione with this particular bundle. Now, given that on Xbox, ACC is one of the only available actual sim racing titles, if you want to, discount racing games, then that may be a deal breaker for some people. So again, check at the time that you're watching this video. That may have changed. We'll put a pinned comment down below if it does change, but I wanted to mention that pretty early on here just because I do think that it is a major consideration. So let's take a more detailed look now at the quality of the hardware that you're going to be getting with this new R3 bundle. So I'm going to set the wheel aside just for now and let's focus in on this tiny little wheelbase. I'll flash the dimensions up on the screen for you now, but just to put it in context for you, here is a R5. So 5 Newton meter peak versus the 3.9 Newton meter peak that we have with the R3. So pretty significant difference there in size. That's going to be important to you if you're running on a rig that maybe isn't as strong. The more weight you have on the wheel deck, potentially the more flex and movement that you're going to have. One thing I did notice when testing is that on rigs that had a little bit more movement, I did actually notice the movement a little bit more with a bigger, heavier wheelbase than with the lighter one that we have here. Not a big difference when you look at it on camera, but it was something that I noticed in my hand, so I thought that was worth just mentioning. Now, if we move those aside and have a quick look at the Fanatec CSL DD by comparison as well, because I know that's something that a lot of you guys will be considering as an alternative option, way bigger. Yeah, so that may well be something that is an important consideration, and yeah, the weight between the two of them as well is way different. This is much heavier than what we have with the R3. So let's set this guy aside again as well. Just having a quick look at the overall build quality of the unit itself. Again, like we've come to expect from MOZA, there's not really any surprises here. We've got a plastic shell on the back here, nice high quality plastic. We've got our USB B port. We've got our DC input here. We've got an emergency stop jack, which I was actually really happy to see. Even if you look at something like the Acertec La Prima bundle, which is a obviously much different class of product to what we have here, much more high end. Even that doesn't have an emergency stop functionality, which was something that I actually nitpicked about that particular product. So really happy to see that functionality there. That is an additional accessory that you can purchase from MOZA, and that's something that we looked at in our MOZA Racing ecosystem overview video just a couple of months ago. We've got a handbrake port here, a shifter port here, a dash port here, and we do also have provision for mounting one of their dashes on the top here, which is a good thing to see. And then our RJ45 connection here for connecting through to our pedals, which is very important as we discussed before. So all of the inputs and outputs that you would expect to see. A nice metal construction here on the front. One thing I did notice is that the material is kind of this dark gray rather than black, which I'm not a huge fan of. If we pull up the R5 again, you can see this one is sort of more of a jet black, and yeah, something that I just noticed. It's a subjective thing, but something that I thought was worth just pointing out to you guys. But most importantly, we've got the same really high quality quick release on the front of the motor here. So you can see the contact pins here for connecting through to our wheel. And it is as simple as just pushing the wheel onto the wheelbase. It all clicks into position using this really nice high quality quick release mechanism, which is basically a clone of the NRG style quick release that you'll find in a lot of race cars. You can see the pins inside which are providing power and data connection through to the base, but there is absolutely no flex or movement in these quick releases. Really, really solid connection, which is definitely a big advantage over what you get with the CSL DD by comparison. We've talked about it a million times and we covered it in a lot of detail in our CSL DD review, but there's quite a lot of movement from side to side in those quick releases, as well as this kind of clunking sound that you get occasionally on quick changes of direction. So definitely a far superior experience with the quick release that we have here with MOZA. Now we've been using and testing MOZA wheelbases now for, I want to say, the better part of almost 3 years, believe it or not. And yeah, we've never ever had a single failure or any sort of, you know, loosening or weakening of the quick release over time at all. So definitely a much superior quick release that we get with MOZA over the Fanatic equivalent. So if that's something that's important to you, definitely worth noting there. So that is the tiny little wheelbase. Oh, we should mention mounting as well. We've got 4 mounting holes. Again, I'll put the spacing and dimensions up on the screen for you guys. One thing that is important to note here is that this isn't the same spacing as you get with their R5 all the way through to their R21. That has a larger spacing here. So what we were finding is that we were only able to mount 2 holes in the majority of rigs that we tested this with, which was actually fine given the weight and the size of this thing. But you may find that you end up having to drill a couple of additional M6 holes on your wheel deck depending on the rig that you're mounting on. That is a good time to also segue across to the table clamp, which we took a brief look at earlier. As I mentioned before, I think that this is far superior to the Fanatic one. That one is constructed of plastic. It's quite big and bulky. And look, it does do the job, but it does have a little bit of forward to back rocking movement in it, as you can see in our CSL DD review. This one, by comparison, is made of steel, as you can see by the fact that the magnet is sticking to it. Really, really sturdy. No perceivable movement. You might see a little bit of movement on camera, admittedly, but no perceivable movement in the clamp itself at all. This particular table does have a little bit of wobble in it, as I'm sure a lot of your tables will at home as well. But yeah, look, it does the job absolutely fine. It did the job absolutely fine for everything, even up to an R12. But for something as weak as a 3.9 Newton meter wheelbase, it is absolutely fine. And it's great that they include that as well. It's not something that you have to pay extra for like you do in the Fanatic ecosystem. So another important point there. And then I think that takes us across quite nicely to the new Xbox compatible ES wheel. Remembering again that the compatibility for Xbox does come from the wheel. So if you're looking at trying to make one of your other MOZA bases Xbox compatible, this, at least at this point in time, is going to be the wheel that you're going to be looking at. Remembering again that you do have to buy it in the bundle at this particular point in time. So it is essentially, and I'll move this guy aside, it's essentially exactly the same as the ES wheel, which comes included with the R5 bundle. The only difference being here cosmetically that you have your Xbox button down here, which is just a little sticker that they've stuck over the top of a flat button, and then the material that they've used for the wrapping is different too. So this is a pleather kind of material, like a faux leather, which does actually have quite a nice feel to it. By comparison, on the new Xbox compatible ES wheel, it is a kind of plasticky material. It does still have a little bit of squish to it. When I first looked at it, I actually thought that it was going to feel absolutely horrible. I thought it was just like a hard plastic. But honestly, guys, for the price, I really don't think that it's all that bad. It does have, as I said, a nice amount of squish to it. And, you know, it feels quite comfortable in your hands. Ergonomically, the wheel actually isn't too bad at all. You can see it's got the nice little kind of cutaways here for the shape of your hands as they wrap around. It's got the center line here at the top as well. And being a 280 millimeter diameter, it is quite versatile as well. You're going to find that it's okay for driving everything from Formula style cars all the way through to, you know, your GT3, GT4, and even street cars as well. For a stronger wheelbase, I would prefer to have a larger diameter. Probably 300 millimeter, I think, is the best all-rounder, but the wider the diameter of the wheel, the more of a damping effect it has on the force feedback. So I think this is a good choice for diameter. The one nitpick that I do have, though, for the ergonomics is just the fact that it's a D shape, as I alluded to earlier. I much prefer a round wheel to be included with these kinds of bundles, where it's likely to be the only wheel that people are going to have, simply because D-shaped wheels do make it quite difficult to do things like drifting and even rally style driving. Anything where the wheel is going to be slipping quickly through your hands, you'll find that with a D-shaped wheel, it does tend to bounce around rather than just slipping. So that's something that I've nitpicked about a lot of these types of bundles recently. And Camus, actually, they have told me that they're planning on releasing a round wheel version of their C5, which I was really happy about. So hopefully we see something similar from MOZA. Now, if you've got a keen eye, you might have noticed that the wheel rim itself is actually removable from the button plate behind it. So if you undo these 6 bolts around the face here, there's actually 2 wheel mod options, as they call it, available directly from MOZA. So we've got the Formula style, which is still 280 millimeters. So you can see it's the same diameter as the ES wheel, but obviously gives you that Formula style. That comes in at $39 US. Again, obviously factoring in shipping and taxes if relevant to you. Then we also have the 12-inch round wheel mod 2, which is going to be absolutely fantastic for drifting and rally style driving. This is unfortunately quite expensive at $79 US, although it does have this nice high quality, I don't think it's genuine leather, but it's the same kind of material as we have on the standard ES wheel. So really nice feeling, good squishy in the hands. And again, we'll retain that Xbox compatibility without being anywhere near as expensive as having to buy a completely separate wheel, including the button plate and everything. So those are a couple of important options I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of. And look, again, for the price, I'm happy with the way the buttons and everything feel. They're nothing to write home about, of course, but you know, they're certainly not the worst buttons that I've ever felt on a wheel. They've got a good amount of, you know, click to them. It does have quite a hollow sound to it. The shifters aren't absolutely fantastic either. You know, quite clicky, quite a bit of travel there, and quite a bit of, you know, you hear it click and then it continues to pull in. But again, for the price point, I really don't think that it's anything worth complaining about. And in terms of functionality, you've got all the important stuff here. You've got your menu buttons, your screenshot buttons, and all your standard Xbox buttons on the layout here, which makes it nice and easy to navigate through menus and do all those kinds of things. I didn't find a single instance where I actually had to go and connect my controller. I was able to do everything that I needed to do directly from the wheel, which is always a nice thing. So yeah, no complaints at all, really, with regards to the wheel for the price point. And I do really love the fact, as I said before, that they include that same really high quality quick release that we see on their much more expensive wheels too. So really looking forward to seeing how they actually flesh out this ecosystem with regards to Xbox compatible wheels, because I think that's something that will be very exciting for a lot of people. So let's set that guy aside now and let's talk about the pedals very briefly that they include. So these are the SRP Lite Pedals, which come included in the R3 bundle. Now we've covered these in detail many times before on the channel. We did a dedicated video where we talked about all the pedals available in their ecosystem and some of their strengths and weaknesses. So I definitely recommend checking that out. But the basic rundown here is that you've got 2 pedals included, obviously a throttle and a brake. As you can see in the back here, there's no sort of elastomer stack or anything like that. Both of these pedals are using Hall effect sensors to detect the actual physical position of the pedal, not the amount of pressure or force that's being applied to the face of the pedal. So that is an important distinction, which we'll unpack a little bit further. Hall effect sensors have the advantage over something like cheap potentiometers that aren't sealed, like what you would find in your Logitech entry-level pedals, for example. They don't take on dirt and debris over time, so they're not going to change in calibration or get grindy or, you know, gritty or anything like that. So in terms of their mechanical design, very, very happy with them. In terms of the actual driving feel, that's where a little bit is left to be desired here. So you can imagine if you're touching the brake here, you're detecting the physical position of the pedal. That has a couple of disadvantages. So if you have a look in the back of the pedal here, you can see that all it's fighting against you is just the spring, which is trying to push the pedal back. And it is quite stiff, not too stiff, but you know, a good amount of resistance there. The disadvantage that we have here is that there's no sort of stack behind this, elastomer stack like what we would find in a load cell pedal, for example, which is providing progressive resistance against your foot. So what that means is that you can push the pedal all the way to 100% and never really feel a mechanical point of resistance, I guess, in the pedal that allows you to hit that braking threshold consistently and you know, maintain those consistent lap times. So the reason that's important is it's a lot easier to establish muscle memory based on a force or pressure input than it is on a position of your ankle. So you should always be braking from your thigh rather than from your ankle itself, and that's a lot more difficult to do with this style of pedal. Now there is a couple of mods available for these pedals, and those do make a significant improvement. Again, check out our other videos talking about these pedals for more details on that. But look, I think there's what we have to acknowledge here is that there's 2 different types of people that are going to be looking at this bundle. There's the people that are looking at an entry point to, you know, proper sim racing where braking is really important, and you know, those are the kinds of contexts where this is going to be an important consideration for you guys. If you're just looking at buying this bundle to play, say, Forza or, you know, Wreckfest or something like that on Xbox, this isn't going to be a problem for you. The pedals are going to be absolutely fine. So I want to make sure that that is absolutely clear. But where I think that there is an important consideration to be made if you're looking at doing more hardcore sim racing is that Fanatec's offerings within their ecosystem are a lot better than anything that's available within the MOZA ecosystem. So again, we unpacked this in a lot of detail in our ecosystem overview video, but even if you step up to something like their SRP pedals, those have quite a few issues in my opinion with the design. They're very, very clumsy to adjust the elastomer stack and make changes to how the pedals feel. The elastomers also do have a tendency to wear out and crack over time as well. And I just don't think that they're very well designed pedals for the price, particularly if you compare them to what's available within the Fanatic ecosystem, which is also Xbox compatible. So their CSL DD bundles, which we're comparing at this kind of price point, are a similar design to this, are going to give you a similar experience to these pedals. I want to make sure that's clear to you guys. But the CSL Elite V2 pedals, in my opinion at least, are the best value for money sim racing pedals available on the market. So if you are looking at more of the sim racing side rather than the racing game side, that will definitely be an important consideration. And I would definitely recommend going checking out all those pedal reviews that we've done in the various different ecosystems, just to give you a better understanding of exactly what you're getting into and what might suit your needs and budget best. And again, just to reiterate, the reason why this is important when we're talking about the context of Xbox is that you're going to need to choose an ecosystem that's compatible with your pedals. If you're on a PC, it doesn't matter because you can just plug in any pedal set you want via USB, but with Xbox, you will have to connect the pedals through to your base. So if the pedals you have aren't compatible with the base, you're not going to be able to use it on Xbox. So that covers everything I think you guys need to know in terms of the hardware of the wheel, the base, and the pedals. Let's jump over onto the sim rig now, and I'll take you through the user experience. Okay, so I wanted to take you through quickly and give you a brief overview of the software that you're going to be running if you're using this base on PC. Now, you might be wondering, well, that's all well and good. If I want to run this on Xbox, how do I change my settings? That's a very good question. There is also an app available for your Android or Apple smartphone, which I'll take you through in just a minute as well. So we're just going to have a top level look here. I've gone through all these settings in details. We even have some detailed settings guides available over on MOZA's channel as well if you want to check those out. So I'll put some links down in the description below for you, but just to give you a really quick look at exactly what you're dealing with here so you get a basic understanding. So this is the homepage of the MOZA Pit House software. We've got the basic adjustments here for your steering angle as well as your game force feedback intensity. This is basically just going to adjust how strong the wheelbase feels in your hands. We go down to our base settings here. We've got a page full of basic settings here. Again, things like your steering angle, your game force feedback intensity, same as what we saw on the homepage. We've also got adjustments here for our maximum wheel speed, spring strength, wheel damper setting, as well as road sensitivity. So these are adjustments that you can make to fine tune how the overall feeling feels of the force feedback. And each of these settings does actually have a tooltip here as well, which explains exactly what it does. So I would recommend experimenting with this, kind of fine tune it to your own preferences. We do, as I said before, have some settings guides available, not specifically for the R3, but you'll find those work pretty well as a baseline, and you can just fine tune to your personal preference. There's also a tab here for advanced settings. That just takes you through some more specific settings with regards to things like friction and inertia, things like that. And then we also have two really cool things in MOZA, which I haven't seen from any other manufacturers just yet. Force feedback equalizer. This allows us to fine tune the response at certain different frequency levels. So if you've got a certain frequency which you feel is a little bit dull, so say for example, if you feel like road textures feel okay, but then when you run up on a ripple strip, it just doesn't quite have enough detail, what you can do is you can boost up the amplitude at that specific frequency, and that's going to give you a bit of a non-linear response, but a bit of a boost around those kinds of frequencies. So you can imagine we can fine tune and tweak things to our heart's content here. We don't have any Q adjustment, so we can't adjust the width of what we're adjusting. We also can't move these forward and backwards through more granular frequency ranges. So it's purely just what we have available on each slider here. And then we also have base force feedback curve adjustment too. So this is also a non-linear type way of adjusting things, but rather than it pertaining to a specific frequency range, what this is doing is it's allowing you to boost the amplitude at certain levels in a non-linear fashion. So again, imagine you're driving along and you're feeling like the impacts that you're having with other cars or the walls, or maybe even when you bump up on a ripple strip, that feels strong enough, but road detail is lacking. What this will allow you to do is boost up those lower level amplitudes to higher level to give you that non-linear response. So say for example, we want to boost up our lower levels. We can do something like this. And you can imagine now anything that would be outputting, say, a level of 20, and this is just a scale basically. So anything that's outputting, say, 20% strength overall is going to be bumped up to more like 50%. According to this curve and so forth. So the overall effect of that is that weaker signals feel stronger, but you don't end up clipping up in the top end. So it's good to see these kinds of adjustments available, and definitely when it comes to weaker force feedback wheels like what we have here with the 3.9 Newton meters in the R3, this kind of thing becomes a lot more useful. If you're running something like a R12 or up through say an R21, you're probably not going to need any of this because you're going to have enough strength at those lower levels anyway. But just to give you a brief explanation on what that does, you then got a page here for your wheel settings and so forth through pedals and down through all the various different peripherals that are available. You can update your firmware through here as well. But again, if you want to see this in more detail, jump into one of those other videos linked down in the description. I'll take you through every single setting and exactly what it does to give you a better understanding. But overall impressions of the software are very good. It does all the things that it needs to do very well. Everything is relatively approachable and well laid out. There is a little bit of broken English in some of the tooltips that you'll see in certain places, but you know, once you get your head around the way it's working, it's all pretty well and good and easy to use. You can also load and export presets as well. So if you want to set up different profiles for different cars or different sims, or even just try out your mate's settings, you can do all that through here as well. Now, I mentioned earlier the mobile app as well. Now, one disadvantage that you have with MOZA compared to the Fanatec ecosystem is Fanatec has the ability to adjust settings via the wheel directly. Now, there are some settings that you can change in the MOZA ecosystem, but you don't have any sort of visual confirmation on the wheel like you do with Fanatec's wheels, simply because they've got the little display that allows you to actually see what you're adjusting in real time. So the alternative to that is this funky little mobile app. Now, I should mention that Fanatec do also have a mobile app now too, which we had a look at just recently, and it does pretty much all the same kinds of things as this, in addition to being able to make those adjustments on the wheel too. So if we click on connect to device, it's going to connect to our wheelbase directly via Bluetooth. Simple as that, straight through. We've already activated the devices, so we don't need to worry about any of that. We then just simply click on enter the car, and this allows us to adjust pretty much all the same settings that we've just had a look through in Pit House. It doesn't have the force feedback curve. It does have the equalizer, but not the amplitude curve that we were looking at before. I'm sure that's something that they'll add in, but you can load presets, do all those kinds of things through the software here as well. So it all works, again, very well, very neat and tidy. I haven't had any issues with reliability whatsoever. And this, of course, will be absolutely vitally important if you're running on your Xbox, where you don't have the ability to go in and change settings other than just the settings that are available in the games themselves, which are often quite primitive. So this is going to allow you to fine tune things and get things really dialed in to suit exactly the way you want them to feel. And I think that's pretty much everything we need to cover in terms of software. So let's talk now about what it's actually like to drive with the R3 and the ES wheel for Xbox. So let's discuss the driving experience now. And I've been thinking about the best way to present this, because I think there's two different types of people that are going to be watching this video. There's those who are racing on the more, I guess, hardcore sim racing side of things, probably on PC, and looking at their next upgrade in terms of hardware, or maybe looking into buying into an ecosystem for the very first time. And then we've got the people that are looking to buy something for Xbox use and probably looking at the more kind of casual gaming aspects of what this brings to the table. So let's start off with the PC sim racing side of things, and then we'll discuss the Xbox side in a little bit more detail too for you guys. So look, in terms of the PC experience, very, very similar to what we've had with all of the MOZA Racing Direct Drive products that we've reviewed in the last couple of years. Look, it's incredibly smooth. There's a lot of detail there as well. The same, I guess, not necessarily complaints, but the same observations that I've had with some of their other bases recently with the R5, the R9 V2, and the R12, in that you need a little bit more filtering just to get rid of that slightly robotic feeling than you do with some of the other brands that we've reviewed. So what that means in a practical sense is to filter out some of those effects that might feel a little bit unrealistic on MOZA bases. You end up ultimately dulling down the overall sensation of force feedback and some of that granular detail a little bit more than is the case with some of the other ecosystems that we've reviewed. Now, if you compare the driving experience to something like a Logitech G920 or G923, it's absolutely leagues above. Now, there's a couple of really important things that you're going to notice with this if you compare it to something like a G920 or a G923. First and foremost, it is a lot smoother overall. You don't get that kind of clunky cog feeling that you get with a cog-driven wheelbase, obviously being direct drive. It's also a hell of a lot quieter. This is pretty much completely silent in operation compared to something like the G920, G923, which is extremely loud. And that can be the difference between being able to race at night time if you've got kids asleep in the next room or a partner trying to study or sleep or something like that. So absolutely a massive advantage with regards to that as well. But the main difference here is more just in the amount of detail that you feel. The little granular details like track effects, things like that are just so much more detailed, even with the considerations that we were talking about with filtering earlier. Just so much more detail overall with something like this than what you're going to get with a cog-driven wheelbase. So it really is a transformative and game-changing experience upgrading from one of those cog-driven wheelbases to something like this. And then there's also the consideration of strength as well. So again, comparing to the entry-level Logitech stuff, much stronger here, much more detail overall, and just a better all-round driving experience. I do prefer the pedals that come bundled with the G923, but remembering again, if you are racing on a PC, you can upgrade the pedals to anything you want to run anyway. So that's not really quite such an important consideration other than just kind of budgeting overall. So yeah, look, I think it really comes down to the question of, all other things being pretty much equal in terms of detail, smoothness, quietness, all those things. Really, it just comes down to the strength here, comparing within the MOZA ecosystem at least. And look, for me at least, I actually do think that this is better value than the R5 bundle, simply because there isn't a huge amount of difference in the overall strength compared to the R5. The amount of detail and all those things that you're getting through the base are pretty much the same. So it's really just that peak strength where you notice a slight difference. And when you consider things like the fact that this base is a little bit more compact, still maintains that high build quality, still the same high quality quick release. Yeah, it just seems overall like a better value proposition than the R5 bundle does, even though that is very good value as well. So then we compare to something like, say, the Camus C5, for example. And look, again, I just think that this makes a lot more sense than the Camus C5 does. Look, again, that is very good value for money, but it's a much more of a niche kind of product. Not being able to change the wheel, the interchangeable wheels that we have here in the MOZA ecosystem and their expanding ecosystem is definitely a big selling point over something like a Camus C5. But depending again where you are in the world, the Camus C5 may end up being significantly cheaper than this is. But look, the reality is that, when you start to get into this entry-level direct drive stuff, things have really heated up in the last year or so. And I genuinely feel like it's at the point now where there isn't really a bad choice in terms of the quality of force feedback amongst any of these different, comparisons that we're talking about here. So really it just comes down to the wider ecosystem, what you think is going to actually suit your needs best. Now, when we compare across to the Fanatic ecosystem, things get a little bit more complicated because, as we mentioned earlier, the quick release that we get with the MOZA ecosystem is just so much better than the QR1 on the Fanatic bases that it's not even a fair comparison. Like, they're just in completely different classes from each other. And the reality of that is that you just get a much firmer feeling wheel on any MOZA setup that we've ever tested, at least compared to the CSLDD with the QR1 at least. Obviously that's going to change when the QR2 releases, and we just still don't know when that's going to be, so we can't really comment on it. But Fanatic do have a couple of important advantages which are worth considering. Those are the fact that they have a wider ecosystem when it comes to wheel choices. That is very important for some people, again, depending on what kind of cars and styles of driving you're going to be doing, but also the fact that their CSLDD wheelbase is also upgradable to that 8 Nm peak mark, which does make a significant difference to the overall driving experience. So, at that point, you're talking about something which is twice the strength of what you have here, a little bit more than twice the strength, in fact. And at 8 Nm, you're definitely more likely to never feel the need to upgrade that base. Whereas with something like the R3, I still feel like, while it's a great entry or gateway into more serious sim racing, and it's definitely going to give you a good experience, I do feel like the majority of people are probably likely at some point to feel compelled to upgrade further. Whereas the CSLDD, if you're able to jump straight to that, less likely that you're going to be wasting money later on down the line, buying and selling equipment and potentially losing money on it. Now, the market's always shifting there as well. Secondhand values at the moment are actually quite good. But again, these are just important considerations which I think you need to make if you're considering one of these for sim racing. But again, in my opinion, at this point in the market, with how saturated this entry-level direct drive market is becoming, there just really isn't a bad choice, when you consider all these things that we've discussed. So I think that's pretty much all there is to say in terms of the experience on PC. It does a good job. The software is all nice and easy to use. We have the mobile app as well for tweaking things on the fly, which is really good. And yeah, overall, it just does a really good job for the money, I'd say. So let's discuss Xbox experience now. And this is where I think things are maybe a little bit less clear cut, even though we don't have the abundance of choice here with compatibility that we have on a PC. So look, the first thing that I want to discuss here with regards to the driving experience is the fact that the overall quality of force feedback that you're going to get on a console is lower than what you get on a PC. And we did a dedicated video where we compared the driving experience between PS5 and PC about a year ago now. I'll link it down in the description for you guys. The experience was pretty much the same with Xbox as well. So testing it across all the various different titles that we did, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, we weren't able to test Assetto Corsa Competizione because it's just simply not working with this bundle at this point in time. And that was very disappointing because I was very much looking forward to seeing what that felt like as probably what would have the best quality force feedback on console out of any racing title that's available at this point in time. But what I can tell you is we did test the Fanatec CSL DD on the Xbox, and that definitely did feel less detailed in the force feedback than what we have in the same title on PC. So look, the overall experience with force feedback using all the various different bases that we tested on the Xbox isn't as good as it is on PC. There just isn't that same level of detail, that same level of granularity, and you just aren't getting the value for money out of an expensive direct drive setup on a console. And the same goes for PS5 as it does for Xbox. The experience was pretty much exactly the same with the Xbox as what we had on PS5. So I think that is probably important consideration number one, is that, you know, you're spending money on something that isn't going to give you the same return on investment as you get with a PC. So it's important that you guys understand that. But that said, all of these products are also PC compatible. So if you upgrade later on down the path, that of course is something that you can take advantage of. Now, the other advantages that we discussed with regards to overall strength and quietness as well, again, are going to be important considerations with the Xbox, obviously. So for me, at least at around this kind of price point, the decision would come down to this. So look, I would absolutely choose this 100% over something like the Logitech G923 or G920. The experience is just absolutely, unequivocally, you know, many times better, you know, quieter, smoother, more detail, more strength. So I think given the small price difference between something like this and something like your G920, G923, it just makes absolutely no sense at this point in time to be buying one of those products when you could buy this. I just think this is that much better. So where it gets complicated is comparing to the CSL DD bundle. But I think really what you need to consider most of all, and what's going to have the biggest impact on what's going to give you the best value for money, is purely down to the types of racing titles that you're going to be playing on the Xbox. So if you're going to be playing things like, you know, your Forza Horizon, your Grid, your Wreckfest, you know, the more arcade style titles, you're not really going to be taking advantage of the extra money that you'd be spending on something like the CSL DD over something like this. The experience is very similar between this and, you know, that of the CSL DD. And the pedals aren't really a factor there either. You know, you don't need to have load cell pedals or, you know, high quality pedals with the threshold point like we discussed earlier on in the video. You know, they just don't have the same impact on those types of titles as they do on sim racing titles. But if you're looking into getting more serious about sim racing, but then also want to stay on console, that is where I think the CSL DD ends up being the better value. Even though it is, you know, considerably more expensive, just having those upgrade options available for better quality pedals than anything, again, in my opinion, that's available within the MOZA ecosystem would be enough to sway me in that direction, and I think be enough to convince me to spend the extra money. Now, obviously, you would have to spend more money again to upgrade those pedals, but the fact that, you know, we are locked into a particular ecosystem and just the pedals that are directly compatible within that ecosystem when we're playing on a console, I think that that is a very important consideration. So there are a lot of things to consider here. I wish it was more clean cut, but look, for me personally, I would choose the CSL DD bundle over this simply because of the types of titles that I would be playing if I was locked into an Xbox. If I was on PC, I think again, I probably would go with the CSL DD simply because you have that ability to upgrade to 8 Newton meters strength and a more abundance of choice when it comes to the wheel ecosystem as well. But that said, MOZA is constantly upgrading their ecosystem, and this is considerably cheaper as well. So I certainly don't think you'd be disappointed with this. I do think that it's a good buy. I just think that there are some really important considerations there which may alter the outcome depending on what exactly you're looking to get out of it and what you also think you're likely to do into the future as well. You don't want to sort of be thinking, oh, you know, I just want to dip my toes in racing games, I don't really care, and then, you know, 6 months down the line wish that you'd gotten something better because you end up, you know, going down the sim racing rabbit hole. So consider what you might want to do into the future as well. But yeah, look, absolutely no reason not to recommend the R3. I think it does a really good job for the money. I think it is exceptional value for money. And again, you know, the build quality is absolutely fantastic. The quick release in particular is absolutely fantastic. And I really appreciate the fact that, you know, we keep seeing these cheaper and cheaper and cheaper products coming out from MOZA, but they're not skimping on that overall build quality. And yeah, they've been absolutely fine in that regard. Now, there is one more thing that I just want to quickly discuss here as well, which is, I think, an important part of the story. And that is how the experience with all of these sim racing wheels that we've discussed here compare to the experience with a controller. Now, Look, for me personally, I spent quite a bit of time playing Forza Horizon 5 over the last week or so on the Xbox. We bought this Xbox just for doing this review. So I didn't have a lot of experience with the Xbox previously. I'm more of a PlayStation guy. But look, for me, I actually prefer the experience of playing games like Forza Horizon, even things like Grid with the controller over any of the wheels that we've tested here. I just think that they're more suited to this style of input. One thing that we did notice across every single one of the bases that we tested, including Logitech stuff, is there was noticeably more input lag, particularly in Forza Horizon 5. That was consistent across everything that we tested, but when we switched across and started using the controller again, there was noticeably less input lag there. But look, these hand controllers are getting really good these days. The quality of the haptic feedback that you get out of them is very good as well. So I do think that that is something that's worth considering as well. Do you, for the types of gaming that you're going to be doing, do you actually need a wheel at all, or is the controller absolutely fine? It's just something to consider, because I don't want you guys to go out spending a fortune on sim racing gear and then find that you just ultimately end up going back to the controller anyway. So hopefully the video helps you out. I know it's a lot to take in. It certainly wasn't an easy video to put together, this one, because there are so many different things to consider. But hopefully you've got a clearer picture now of what might suit your particular needs best. Again, we do have links down in the description below for our full reviews of all the various different products that we've talked about in today's video. And if you do decide you want to pick up any of the gear we've talked about, we have some links where you can purchase them from our affiliate partners as well. So we really appreciate your support there. But above all, thank you very much for watching. As always, if you do have any questions at all, anything specific, let us know down in the comments below. We'll do our absolute best to answer those for you. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye.